Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, kushalmehra. All right, time for another election analysis podcast. This time, the focus is going to be two states where we are going to have an up and coming election. Those two states will be Uttarakhand and Manipur. And to discuss those two states with me, I have, as always, Aadit Kapadia. Aadit, welcome.
Well, hi Kushal. Good morning, good evening, everyone, to wherever they're watching, from wherever they're watching. The election season is heating up, as you can see. Uttarakhand का तो चलो election अब already हो चुका है. I think now we are waiting for the results in on 10th March. But we'll delve into some very fascinating history of elections. Manipur is yet to vote in 10 days. So कल research कर रहा था, and for all our previous viewers, if you think Goa was crazy, wait till you hear the history of Manipur.
Manipur and Uttarakhand both. So let's start with Uttarakhand first. So something
Yeah.
very interesting. When I started looking at Uttarakhand, so Goa had the special privilege of having 15 changing chief ministers from 1984 or 87 onwards. So Uttarakhand says, "Hold my beer," right? So Uttarakhand in 21 years since it has become a state has had 11 chief ministers already, right?
11 chief ministers, three in the past, I think, what, 1 year, 1.5 year. Yeah, Pushkar Singh. I mean, it seems like Tirath Singh Rawat. Harak Singh Rawat. It's like a crazy sort of turnaround. And if you take out N.D. Tiwari, who ironically provided probably the most stable government in the history of Uttarakhand. His shenanigans aside, he was there for 5 years, and उससे पहले कोश्यारी for 2.5 or about actually not even 2 years, 1 year essentially, 6 months. N.D. Tiwari after the first election, उसके बाद उसके 5 साल आप अगर निकाल दे तो उत्तराखंड की हिस्ट्री में from 2007 to 2022 there have been 10 chief ministers in 15 years, which is crazy. And Mr. Khanduri, who was a very clean guy, then BJP replaced him with Mr. Pokhriyal, and then a few days before the election, they replaced him with Mr. Khanduri again. And that election, everyone thought was going to go completely. Well, actually, let me start from the beginning before we get into the history of Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand was formed in 2000, the year 2000, because at that time it was carved out of Uttar Pradesh. The first chief minister was Nityanand Swamy for about close to a year, and then Bhagat Singh Koshyari was the current governor of Maharashtra, both from the BJP, because at that time the BJP, I think, was in power in Uttar Pradesh, so consequently BJP formed the government in Uttarakhand, or maybe it had enough seats in the assembly.
Originally the name was Uttaranchal.
Uttaranchal, yes, that's right, Uttaranchal, हाँ. And उत्तराखंड में और उत्तरांचल में तब कुछ interesting parties थी, because one of the parties in sort of that was at the forefront of demanding a separate Uttaranchal was a party called Uttarakhand Kranti Dal, or UKD, which would always win 4 or 5 seats, something like that, maybe more before Uttarakhand was formed. Now Uttarakhand Kranti Dal is probably close to like 1 or 2 seats, similar to MGP. So for all our Goa podcast listeners, they would have understood what the history of MGP. You can probably impose the same sort of scenario with UKD, where it was relevant, but not as relevant as MGP, but just थोड़ा बहुत उनको मिल जाता था. So, but Uttarakhand has always had a revolving door policy. कि पहले 5 साल कांग्रेस आता है, 5 साल बीजेपी आता है, और फिर घूमता रहता है, right? And even in the first election that in the history of Uttarakhand, Congress won probably 26% of the vote, 26.9, and BJP won 25.4. So difference तो दोनों में 1.5% ही है. The most interesting feature in Uttarakhand has always been, since it was formed, is the Bahujan Samaj Party. The BSP has always had close to 10% vote share, कभी कभी 6-7% तक आ जाता है. Last election was a landslide for the BJP, so no one mattered, like सबको एक दो परसेंट या एक दो सीट ऐसे मिली. But BSP only had BSP had 7 seats actually in the first election of Uttarakhand. So quite a force to reckon with. Of course, at that time Mayawati was a rising force, and in 2007 when the election, when BJP won, getting 35 out of 70, that was even more evident because BJP was in alliance with Uttarakhand Kranti Dal (UKD), and some independents supported it, so they got like close to 41 seats, and BSP got 8 seats fighting on its own. So that was the thing. So then moving down from the history from 2011, after Mr. Khanduri almost pulled off the impossible, came probably the closest election in Uttarakhand history. I think people. I mean, over here I was up till late in the night looking at the results because everyone thought it was a done deal. But this is how crazy it gets, Kushal. Congress got 33.79% and 32 seats. BJP got 33.13% and 31 seats. You know which was the one seat that BJP lost and Congress won? The seat of the Chief Minister BC Khanduri himself.
या खंडूरी है जरूरी याद है वो
हाँ
जो
हाँ, Khanduri is जरूरी.
स्लोगन भी था.
So, yeah, so if Khanduri had won that seat, BJP would have actually formed the government because it would have been the single largest party. But such is the weird thing of that. And I remember very famously when he went to send in his resignation to the governor, Margaret Alva. Margaret Alva said the wrong man has been defeated or something like that. And at that time it was a UPA government. So Margaret Alva, I mean, obviously she's a Congress leader. So it was quite interesting that she said it. Of course, the chief minister at that time was a gentleman called Mr. Vijay Bahuguna, who is now in the BJP because Uttarakhand में भी गोवा वाला हाल तो थोड़ा होता ही है कि left goes right and right goes left. अच्छा, there is another interesting thing also. I think Vijay Bahuguna and PC Khanduri are related also somehow. Cousins or something. So anyways, उसके बाद Harish Rawat became the chief minister of Uttarakhand, and Harish Rawat did not really fight an election, but like to become, like, he was elected by the after the 2014 elections where BJP swept all the seats. Harish Rawat took over, and then Vijay Bahuguna of course flipped to the BJP. Then comes the 2017 election, which was a watershed election in Uttarakhand history. Because normally क्या होता है 30-32% होता है. So Congress still kept its vote share of 33.5% in 2017, but BJP had, because of the post Modi 2004 effect, had a upward swing of 13.5%. They went up to 46.3%, which resulted in a 57% vote, 57 seats, and Mayawati went down to 7% vote share. So which she got a big zero. So she still had 7% vote share, but she got zero. And the, I mean, two went to the independents. Now we come to 2022, where BJP actually had the same problem that they had in 2012. कि थोड़ा musical chairs हो गया. Trivendra Singh Rawat made for another chief minister, and then they went to Pushkar Singh Dhami. So Trivendra Singh Rawat, I'm sorry, went to Tirath Singh Rawat and then to Pushkar Singh Dhami. Now this time it gets a little funky because if you look at opinion polls, if you talk to people, journalists on the ground, they're all saying कि भाई it's a lot closer election. I mean, it's significantly closer than last time. This is almost remnant of 2012 elections, and this time there is another candidate or another party also, Aam Aadmi Party, that's fighting. But yeah, but typically, Kushal, you would think कि ऐसे elections में alliances ज़्यादा होती है, right? But I'm going to tell our viewers and listeners कि this is the amount of seats the parties are fighting. BJP 70 seats, Congress 70 seats, Aam Aadmi Party 70 seats, BSP 70 seats, Uttarakhand Kranti Dal 70 seats, and even Samajwadi Party is sending contesting 70 seats. So it
And
is.
just to give people, just to give people a perspective on the caste breakdown of the state. So as of
Hmm,
now, from what I have understood, is Thakurs constitute 35% of the total population,
hmm,
followed by Brahmins, which is 25%, and then you have Dalits as a group that are 19% of the population. Dalits are called Shilpakars in that state, and
hmm,
there is a huge Arya Samaj movement, by the way, in Uttarakhand.
hmm,
In case people don't know, so Arya
hmm,
Samaj and basically Koltas, Domes and लोहार्स, बेसिकली लोहार जो ब्लैक स्मिथ जिनको बोलते हैं, वो हैं उत्तराखंड में. जो ये मेन है, और
hmm,
जल जंगल जमीन Basically,
Hmm.
that is the, the political fault line in Uttarakhand. And if you see, in Uttarakhand,
Hmm.
it is always going to be about the hilly region versus the other region, right? That has always been the political thing. And also, there is a ping pong between who gets the CM ship and who shares the power vacuum when it comes to the
Hmm.
CM ship, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think उससे भी ज़्यादा interesting है. There is a departure of the old Uttarakhand dynasty, if I may say. Like last, I think Congress leader Indira Hridayesh passed away not too long ago. Of course, Mr. ND Tiwari is not there. Mr. Koshyari is now the governor of Maharashtra. Mr. Khanduri is not there. I think Ramesh Pokhriyal is in the center. And what's his name? Even Vijay Bahuguna probably is not in contention. And I know Harish Rawat is being said that he will fight or he's fighting and stuff. But I doubt if Harish Rawat, if he's made the chief, if Congress wins, this is probably his last, going to be his last election as well as the chief minister. I don't
Yeah, but
see him.
Harish Rawat is also sending cryptic messages. Na? So, what is very funny, like intra-party differences have rocked both parties, right? So, in the
Hmm,
case of
hmm,
BJP, we had Hadak Singh Rawat, which was he was
hmm.
a minister,
Yeah.
dramatically, matlab out of the blue, bolta hai, Atamaji Satakli kind of a thing,
हाँ.
and goes into Congress. And Harish Rawat ji, on the other hand, is saying, I am, he's sending cryptic messages, kabhi haan, kabhi na, kind of, you love me not, I am there not, I don't know. I mean, everybody is confused out there. That's all the
Hmm.
whole thing is happening in Uttarakhand right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, see, देखो, that is the classic example that the election is close. Because when you have
Hmm.
so many, because होता क्या है उत्तराखंड में, there are about 5 or 10 seats which are a four-cornered fight or a three-cornered
Yeah.
fight. So at that time, it gets a little, or it always gets funky. So किसी को पता नहीं चलेगा कि कौन से side पे जाएंगी results. And then you have a few seats which are like safe seats कि अगर कोई भी बीजेपी, मतलब बीजेपी का कोई भी लैंप पोस्ट seats, right? A lamp post will also win on BJP ticket. And then you have the whole caste breakdown factor ki, you have a significant Brahmin vote there also, a significant vote in amongst the other castes also. So how does BJP does balances that कि कितने सीट उनको मिलेंगे, कितने सीट you'll have other castes. You also have the OBC vote that BJP has been doing very well in that. And then you have the Congress. And Uttarakhand is also the home of a lot of ex-Faujis, right? So how do you deal with that? I mean, Harish Rawat is an ex-Fauji, right? So and as is Mr. Khanduri. So where will that vote go? So it's a little yeah, and there is also some Muslim population in Uttarakhand as well. So there are some seats where the minority vote, again very minor seats, but then this is a minor election. So if someone tells you कि अरे 4-5 सीट ही है ऐसे भाई, that could decide the election.
Yeah, because see, you have to understand, just like Goa, Uttarakhand is a relatively small state, right, in terms
Yeah.
of number of seats and the population per Vidhan Sabha. So we have to
Mm-hmm.
get, but just a few more facts about Uttarakhand. So, there is a proper Dalit movement in Uttarakhand. So in 1913, they had Tamta Sudhar Sabha in 1905. Later, no, so 1905, then it became Kumao Shilpkar Sabha in 1913. Then Dola Palki Aldolan, all the Palanquin movement was in 1923. Basically, this was about the right to use horses and palanquins, a practice that was prohibited, by the way,
Hmm.
to the Dalits, and they won it in 18 years, by the way. And typical terminologies you'll hear in Uttarakhand is going to be Kumaoni Garhwali, Maidani Pahadi, basically, kind of
Hmm.
thing. Another factoid. So I was looking at the National Crime Record Bureau, and as per the
Hmm.
National Crime Record Bureau, caste-based crimes, let me be very perfect when I'm reading this, have increased to 84% in 2019 from 58% in 2018, a 45% increase, which is higher than the national average of 7%. Now, there could be multiple reasons for this. One of the
Hmm.
reasons is because as India becomes more and more richer and more law and order based society, we are going to have a curve where more reportage is going to be happening, and more people will start having more faith in the state and try to go and solve their problems through the state. So you will
Hmm.
see an uptick because of that, but you cannot totally factor in just that as the uptick. Obviously, there Now somebody might come back to me and say, well, the SC/ST atrocities act has certain problems and that could lead
Hmm.
to certain, but see, my job is that when I do this podcast, or when Adit and I get together, we do our research, we leave our judgment aside. We're trying to share as many data points about the
Yeah,
state. When you have a holistic view about the state, then you can go and draw your own conclusions from the data
yeah, yeah.
points we have shared. But our job is to put all these data points on the table when we are discussing and telling you about a state, because today we are discussing two states, so we pretty much have not more than half an hour to 35 minutes to cover a state,
First state.
which is
Hmm.
kind
Hmm.
of hard, but we're going to try and do that, because next week we have to do the big one, which is Uttar Pradesh. So
Yeah.
go ahead, Adit.
No, and I think there is a problem also here with election analysis. कि लोग समझते हैं कि election analysis equals opinion. It is not. Election
Hmm.
analysis is you state the facts and why
Yeah.
you think XYZ1 or ABC1, right? So, and then you have such crazy sort of results. Like I'll give you an example, right? There is a constituency called Garhwal where that was considered to be a complete Congress bastion, except for Janta Party winning a couple of times before Bhuvan Chand Khanduri or BC Khanduri took over. Now,
Hmm.
बीसी खंडूरी के लिए तो ये completely you can say कि it was his constituency. This is, I'm talking about a Lok Sabha constituency, right? And he's always won. But then you think in a constituency where he could not lose, I think he won. He ended up losing a Vidhan Sabha seat where he was given sort of a very questionable Vidhan Sabha seat in 2012. And since then, Mr. Khanduri won that again in 2014 by 1,84,000 votes. And then last time, Tirath Singh Rawat won it by 3 lakh votes, the ex chief minister of Uttarakhand. So I actually joke that that is the constituencies of the ex chief ministers of Uttarakhand after they got get a Garhwal Lok Sabha constituencies. But yeah, the where it gets a little crazy is if you look at small constituencies like Tharali is one of the example. It's in Garhwal Lok Sabha. In 2018, there was a by-election, right? And BJP won it pretty comprehensively, pehle, but BJP won it by only 1,900 votes in the by-election, and Uttarakhand Kranti Dal got 1,500 votes. Okay, now if there is a vote transfer taking place of from one way to the other, then you look at the margin, it goes down to 200-300 votes. That is how close this election is going to be. I mean, you and I can go through like each and every constituencies, and I can tell you कि ऐसे कितने छोटे छोटे इलेक्शंस है इलेक्शंस विद इन इलेक्शंस है उत्तराखंड में जो होंगे. But I sort of can make a prediction for sure that
So let
the
me bolster your point. So let me bolster your point, showing by this contrast between the Lok Sabha and the Vidhan Sabha thing. See how the BJP is comfortably dominating the Lok Sabha 2009, 2014, 2019, right?
hmm, hmm,
Obviously, अभी आगे वाली लोकसभा तो हुई नहीं है, but they have been comfortably dominating uh, at least for the last 2 terms, right?
yeah,
2014 and 19. 9 में कांग्रेस ने डोमिनेट किया था, right?
hmm,
But
hmm,
it does not transfer into the state election. Last दो state election compare कर.
yeah. Last,
That's what I'm trying to say.
so लोकसभा इज अ वेरी लोकसभा का यही प्रॉब्लम होता है कि इट्स
Numbers matter
डोमिनेट.
is what I'm trying to say.
नंबर्स
Numbers matter
मैटर
and
एंड दूसरा
margins
ये
matter.
नो यस और दूसरा ये होता है ना कि उत्तराखंड इज अ क्लासिक स्टेट वेर यू कैन विन 10 असेंबली सेगमेंट्स बाय 2,000 votes and lose three
Exactly.
others by 12,000 votes and ultimately end up winning the Lok Sabha, but the same results translating into Vidhan Sabha is 10-3 for the other party. So it's a classic state like
True.
that, and especially when you have a lot of government employees, a lot of Fauji's, ex bureaucrats and stuff. National issues do take precedence in Lok Sabha. So
Mhm.
you will find, and I'm not. This is not to belittle the other local population. I'm just saying they
Absolutely.
might be invested more in sort of local MPs, MLAs, and things like that. But then when you have, say, a big national security issue, you would have, and even a Fauji, if he's an ex-Fauji, them voting a certain way based on the national security issue. That's what I would expect. So that's where the national elections and state elections do swing. And a lot of people initially believed कि अरे ऐसा कुछ होता नहीं and stuff. Nothing, nowhere is it more sort of evident if you look at say Odisha or Andhra Pradesh, or which voted with the Lok Sabha. Or last time, that
Mhm.
is why KCR actually advanced the Telangana elections by 6 months. So Telangana does not vote with the Lok Sabha, because you saw what happened in the Vidhan Sabha. The BJP was wiped out and got one or two assembly seats. In Lok Sabha, they got
Mm.
four Lok Sabha seats,
Yeah.
which would have translated to close to 30, 35 assembly seats if the elections were held together.
In fact, this again busts that myth that people say, oh, people just vote mindlessly. In fact, if they want to really test this, they should once do municipal, state, and national elections together. And when they do the three together, they will be pleasantly surprised how people have extremely different voting preferences in all the three levels of governance. So, which again goes down to the point that stop underestimating the intelligence of the voter. Point number A, they're
Yeah,
not that stupid, right?
yeah.
They actually see what's happening. They understand what certain larger issues are. Yes, in India, sometimes we tend to make even our MP our Sandas bathroom representative, which is slightly dangerous. But
Hmm.
but the point is just the sheer variation at the state level, at the central level, is clear proof that, for example, right, even in Gujarat, like BJP has dominated the state, but if you look at the vote percentage share, if I was to extrapolate the state vote percentage into the national vote percentage, the numbers might change for the BJP. At the national level, it's a very different thing. They have sweep after sweep, and
Hmm.
at the state level, it's cutting it tight. Just for
Yeah.
example, I just took Gujarat as an example, which clearly shows people have different kinds of mindsets. People think
Oh,
differently at a state level.
Oh, I will tell you. I'll tell you another shocking result. State election ka. Bihar election 2019 में NDA won 2019. I mean, sorry, 39 out of 40 seats in the Lok Sabha, right? The general election in Bihar. And at that time, the total vote share, and I'm referring to my notes here, but the total vote share for Janata Dal United, BJP, and Lok Janshakti Party was close to 50%. Okay, I mean, it was a complete sweep. RJD and Congress got close to like 20-30% or something like that. Very, very, very less amount. 53% actually is what NDA got. 53%. Change that to 2020 Vidhan Sabha elections, which only happened a year and a half after 2019, under Nitish Kumar, who was a stable chief minister, and LJP walks out of the NDA. The difference between the UPA and the NDA margin is close to 13,000 votes. That is the only difference. मतलब
That's
अगर if you
crazy.
yeah, if you add all the votes that RJD, Congress, and their alliances, I think their CPM also was in alliance, and what BJP and Nitish got, it was like 13,000 or 12,000 votes. That is, I don't even know what fraction of a percentage that is, and that is after Chirag Paswan actually fought against them. So if Chirag Paswan's vote went with the alliance, I don't know what would have happened to the BJP JDU alliance. So this is ये तो एक साल के बाद का ही रिजल्ट है जहां बिहार में, and so that is why BJP is very nervous about how they approach Bihar, because now they are clearly the number one party in Bihar. They are clearly the alternative to RJD. So they have to now see that if JDU is a liability to them or not.
Yeah, but again, in what happens is that, just like in Goa,
Hmm.
when you have smaller constituency sizes,
Hmm. Hmm.
Uttarakhand is also pretty much similar. Average Vidhan Sabha ka seat ka agar tu size dekhega, it is not comparable to Mumbai, yeah, by the way.
No,
It is
no.
not comparable to. And
Yeah.
when such things happen, right, you have to change your calculation perspective for a state election. That in some states you have to start looking at the state election as a municipal election.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how you look at it.
If you really ask me, Kushal, I think that's what the size of state constituencies should be. I think Mumbai, Gujarat, we just have way too many bloated things, which has resulted into some MLAs thinking that they are Raja or Rajwada of their
Oh yeah,
small republic.
absolutely. I
So
agree with you, which is a huge problem.
because I don't think you should represent more than 1 or 2 lakh voters. That's just my, because आप कैसे, मतलब it's humanly impossible to go and talk to like 5 lakh, 6 lakh, 7 lakh voters or
नहीं,
address their
इंडिया
issues.
में लॉजिक ऐसा नहीं होता ना आदित्य. वी हैव टू बी केयरफुल हियर, बिकॉज इन लॉट ऑफ केसेस इंडिया में म्युनिसिपैलिटी के भी, सो वी हैव टू कैलकुलेट द टोटल म्युनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेटर्स,
Wards. Yeah, yeah,
काउंसलर्स,
yeah, 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 absolutely.
उसके बाद एमएलएज और उसके बाद
Hmm.
एमपीज, और उन
Hmm.
सबका डिवीजन करके अगर हम पॉपुलेशन ऑफ द स्टेट को करेंगे, देन वी शुड कम एट the final number. So that final number might be, I'm not saying it is appropriate, please don't get me wrong, but I'm
Yeah.
saying that would be the final number. But before we go on to Manipur, I think we have to
Hmm.
spend some time
Hmm.
about this whole statement by Dhamiji
Hmm.
about we will get a uniform civil code if elected to power in Uttarakhand.
Yeah.
So now, you know, you are not a constitutional expert, nor am I a constitutional expert.
Hmm.
So I don't know how much, how legally feasible a uniform civil code is at a state election level, first of all. Now, somebody might say, oh, BJP is doing it for this reason, that reason. Yeah, obvious. Zippity doodah. Politicians will make political announcements for political reasons. What kind of a nonsensical argument is this? So I don't get that. But my point
No,
is that
no,
why
my
did they make
favorite
this
is
announcement uniquely for Uttarakhand?
I don't know. I think maybe because he had nothing to lose. Like I don't think he would have lost an election if people would have been against uniform civil code. You know what I'm saying? Like if there isn't so much of a sort of an anti-uniform civil code sentiment as opposed to if you said the same thing in Uttar Pradesh, right? You have a significant population that might go the other way. I'm not saying that it would or Uttarakhand wouldn't, but I just think that there is like उसने statement दिया, right? कुछ हुआ? I didn't see any debate happening except for in Delhi studios. Like I follow a lot of regional reporters. I've followed a lot of regional news, local. No one said that uniform civil code was even a factor in Uttarakhand elections. So I think he must have said. और दूसरा ये भी है कि now a lot of chief ministers, leaders pander to Twitter constituencies, right? So who knows, yeah? He must have just said it to get the base energized.
No, no, but see, when it comes to the uniform civil code, it's not that the uniform civil code is only going to be galvanizing a portion of the society. It is going to have a equal effect on both sides, right? So
Correct.
whenever there is Muslim polarization, there is Hindu polarization, and vice versa. When there is Hindu
Yeah.
polarization, there is Muslim polarization. Um, why would one make a statement about a state where, I mean, what is the Muslim population of Uttarakhand, for example?
I
It's
have
not
to
like the
see,
Muslim
but
population of Uttar Pradesh. It's
no,
not like
no,
that.
it won't be. It will be less than 10% if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Uttar
Hmm.
Pradesh is a completely different story. Why would you make
And
a announcement like that in Uttarakhand is what I was trying to. Is this like, I will not announce it in Uttar Pradesh. I will use the shoulders of Uttarakhand to shoot at Uttar Pradesh
yeah.
and help myself politically over there is what I'm trying to think out loud.
Shayad or endear myself a little more sort of than nationally than I may have. I stand corrected. It's so close to 14%, but still very not as much as UP, which is in excess of 20% or something. So it's about 14%. Also, I have to see if ये कहाँ है, right? It could be concentrated in some districts and so forth. So pan Uttarakhand उतना difference नहीं पड़ेगा. But I honestly don't see how it's going to happen just in one state. This is probably going to, if this does happen, it will have to be a national sort of thing, because you may have that he may outlaw some things in the specific parts of like personal laws in Uttarakhand, as opposed to, so say if part of a personal law is allowed in a few states, you can so sort of outlaw. That's what he may have thought कि मैं XYZ law को outlaw कर दूंगा, या I'll apply this. But as a concept, as a whole, I mean, like you said, constitutional experts, but I don't see how this can just happen in one state.
No, no,
Um,
but could this be the future now? Then in that case, Adit, of the uniform civil code in this country, where we may not have a national level law, but different states might try to do it, assuming it holds in the courts of law and it's not a constitutional issue, that we might have BJP governed states going for a UCC for their state, and I don't know what's gonna happen, man. I did not understand the political messaging behind this whole Dhamiji
to be
saying hum
to
UCC
be
लाएंगे.
to be really honest with you, Kushal, I honestly think UCC is probably a low-hanging fruit for BJP in terms of what to get do. Like if you had asked Article 370, UCC, or Ram Mandir, I would have said UCC is probably the most likely to happen first. Of course, we were all spectacularly wrong, and it happened in the other way, where the 370 happened first, then the Ram Mandir, and then UCC. But I see
Yeah.
UCC does not have an emotional value in the hearts and minds of Indians. It really does not. I Ram Mandir does. The whole 370 issue did. UCC might have had sort of, you and I could have feel strongly about it. A lot of sort of people who grew up in the 90s looking at the rise of the BJP could feel very strongly about it. But I don't think uniform civil code now sort of has the same sort of emotional value as it did 10 years, 15 years, 20 years ago. I think 370 and Ram Mandir have that value more. And I think that eventually Uniform Civil Code will come. I just don't think it's going to come. It'll probably come, like, it won't come at a localized level. I also think he may have spoken out of turn. I think he may have spoken without informing the national government that he was going to say this. And this, which is why after that one or two statements, you've not seen a single discussion on Uniform Civil Code. Because if it were to come, I think it will come. The announcement will come from either the Prime Minister or the Home Minister. I don't see it coming from Chief Ministers.
Interesting. Okay, chalo, Adit. Now let's get, because we have to cover two states today.
Hmm.
So now let's get into the second state, that is Manipur, and I'm so proud of my fellow Indians in Manipur and Goa. It's like, ठीक है यार, मतलब, thank you. क्या, what a political history. So go for
Yeah.
it.
Hmm. So Manipur is Manipur is a very interesting state, because it is also one of those states in the northeast where the demographics are also quite fascinating. So Manipur was established in 1949, right? It's a state. That's when it was merged with India. But then, of course, the whole splitting and stuff happened later. But let's. I mean, before I get into the election, because let's basically start with the uh, the demographics of Manipur, because I think that is where it gets a little interesting, because people think that Manipur ka to kya hai ki it will be divided on religious lines and stuff, but it's not really divided on those lines. It's actually the tribal lines and things like that which cause the most interesting issues.
Absolutely, a lot
Yeah.
of tribal problems there.
Exactly. So at that, initially when Manipur was in India, it was a part C, union territory, and then after I think 1956, the State Reorganization Act was passed, and then it became a full state, and it was after 1963 Act, it became a legislative assembly. I don't want to bore you guys with details, but I had to mention this. In 1949 से 63 में क्या हुआ, and the first election happened in 1967. So the demographics of Manipur are, it is close to 41.3%, 41.4% Hindu, 41.3% Christian, about 8.4% Islam, and then there is 7.5% or 7.8% Sanamism, or the Maitai religion. Right? And then you have some Buddhism, Jainism, Judaism, Sikhism, very minor percentages there. Now, where Manipur gets fascinating is because the tribes hold the sway. So the majority of that is the Maitai tribes, which is close to about 53%. I think 50. Basically, when I say Mai Tai tribes, it's the people who speak Mai Tai, which is, I think, 53% of Manipur speaks Mai Tai. Then you have other languages spoken. There are about probably 10 or 12 languages spoken in Mai Tai, in Manipur, and each of those speakers within those tribal regions control sort of the parts of that thing. So a large minority in Mai Tai practices Sanamism, and then Hindu population amongst Mai Tais, they practice sort of amongst the Mai Tai people, they practice Hinduism. So they are concentrated in the valley, and then you have the Christian population, which is concentrated in the other sort of areas of Manipur. So that is sort of the little bit of the conflict between Manipur, and a lot of elections, discussions, and voting happens on this sort of pattern. That is sort of the thing I wanted to give. And now we can get into, Kushal, if you wanted to make a point on that, and before I get into the full sort of
No, so
discussion.
just to clarify, the hilly region in Manipur has basically been constituted of two main tribes. There are the Kukis and the Nagas, right?
Yeah, yeah,
um and the whole thing about there over there is also about territorial homeland. I mean, kiska
right.
homeland hai. But the history of the state, just to let's go through the history.
Yeah.
So from 49 to 72 basically was the Congress era, right?
Hmm.
So
It
the
was the
erstwhile
Congress era.
princely state of Manipur, merged with India in 1949. But Manipur ka first election, interestingly, was held in 1948, right?
1948.
Under
Yeah.
the then
Hmm.
kingdom's own constitution.
Absolutely.
राजा की कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के
Absolutely.
अंदर ही आया था. कोई भी पार्टी को एब्सोल्यूट मेजोरिटी नहीं मिली थी, और तभी एक प्रजा शांति पार्टी थी जिन्होंने सरकार बनाई थी, वो थे.
And Manipur had a lot of issues with insurgency. I mean, it still happens. There is still a lot of elements, that happening. It's been close to 40 years, and you have a lot of organizations sort of doing it. I mean, many. The whole Naga Peace Accord that was signed, that was supposed to calm down, and it has calmed down a little bit. And there has been a dramatic decline in fatalities in the last sort of 13, 14 years. But the 70s and 80s were absolutely violent, and each sort of insurgent organizations or each tribes, like, demanded their own state or autonomous councils and things like that. I think Manipur has one autonomous council, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But basically,
No,
yeah,
so
there was. Sorry,
but
go on.
before we
Yeah.
get into the insurgency phase, which is 1972 onwards, we
Hmm,
have to
hmm,
mention another fact that after 1948,
hmm.
the next election that was held in Manipur was in 1957.
Yeah,
Then periodically elections were held till 1972. Basically, Congress and a few left wing parties were there, and now we get into that, the insurgency phase. So basically, after becoming a state, Manipur had its first election in 1972. Polls were held in 60 assembly seats, 40 in the Meitei dominated valley
yeah,
area, and 20 in the surrounding hill districts, right?
yeah.
So, but the interesting bit is most of the state's population is actually concentrated in the valley,
Valley.
that
Yeah,
area, which
yeah,
is one of the reasons that it creates a huge problem there. And obviously the Meitei community or the Meitei community is in the Imphal Valley,
yeah.
and surrounding hill districts, as I mentioned, are surrounded by Nagas and Kukis, and that's the, I mean, you can say what you want to say. It's just, you have insurgencies galore, like, so let's talk about 1980s
Yeah.
onwards till 2010. You had separatist insurgency in Manipur. you know you had the United National Liberation Front, which was formed in 1964.
Mm-hmm.
80s saw the formation of valley based groups like the People's Liberation Army, People's Revolutionary Party of Kangle Pak, and Kangle Pak Communist Party. These were basically separatist outfits demanding independent Manipur. They are now part of an umbrella organization, right? A larger committee, like it is called the CORCOM, the
Mm-hmm.
Coordination Committee. Now, in the hill districts, which is, the Nagas call their homeland, right?
Mm-hmm.
Outfits like NSCN, IMV, they are the dominant ones over there. The Kuki militancy also starts in the 1990s over here.
Yep.
Then you have the 2002 to 2017, the Ibobi regime, right? So Congress
Hmm.
के जो पुराने दिग्गज नेता
पुराने,
थे, Okram Ibobi Singh, he dominated the scene from 2002 to 2017. But if you remember, न्यूज याद है, वो ब्लॉकेट्स होते थे, हाईवे बंद हो जाती थी, आगे सामान नहीं जाने देंगे.
the
uh,
the
वो एंटी
what you
ट्राइबल
call.
बिल का कुछ हुआ था ना, एंटी ट्राइबल बिल की वजह
Yeah,
से
yeah.
2015
and
में
and
हुआ
then
था.
you had Iram Sharmila in news, who was on that,
ऑस्पा, बिकॉज वो
yeah, the
ऑस्पा था.
ASPA, indefinite fast and stuff, and she also
नहीं,
fought
एक
for.
तो देख, इबोबी सिंह जी के टाइम पे वो 2004 में थांगजाम मनोरमा का 2004 में जो हुई थी रेप
Yeah,
मर्डर उनका हुआ
हाँ,
था. फिर किलिंग्स ऑफ चुंगखाम संजित एंड थोकचोम रबीना देवी इन 2009 बेसिकली
right.
आफ्सपा की था. और इरोम शर्मिला ने तो 2017 में इलेक्शन भी लड़ा था ना उसको लेके.
Yeah, and I mean, against Ibobi Singh, he got like 18,649 votes, and Sharmila got 90 votes, right? So a lot of these activists, although they might have emotional sort of, and I'm not commenting on how the election was and stuff. I'm just saying it's tougher. It's one thing to be an activist and it's one thing to get elected. It's ask Megha Patkar. I mean, she has tried to fight elections and everything, and I mean, I have a lot of criticisms about Megha Patkar and her activism. But this is my exact thing कि उनको एक inflated sense of popularity या something लगता है. Now whatever cause they may represent or their beliefs is a separate debate altogether. But like Kushal and I said, we have to look at election analysis by numbers and not by emotions and stuff. But this is where Manipur gets a little sort of funky, so for the want of a better word, right? Because even when the periods that Kushal went from 1967 onwards, there were significant periods of president's rule and a lot of instability, right? So
Right.
somehow I feel instability at the top of chief ministership is directly proportional to insurgency, because the
Hmm.
insurgents feel कि अगर chief minister बदल रहा है, there are, and like we said that there are primarily three sort of tribes. There are various Naga tribes in Manipur. There is 53% Meitei groups, and the Kukizo tribes are probably about 16, 15, 16%. Those are the three
Hmm.
major. Then within Naga tribes, you have many sub tribes and stuff. And so I was trying to sort of mention that, but then अगर मैं वो करूँगा तो पूरा podcast उसी में चला जाएगा. The complexities of that. But let's look at the chief minister, right? So first, after the Congress, you had the Manipur People's Party formed by Muhammad Ali Muddin. Now Manipur is not a population that has a lot of state which has a lot of Muslim population. Yet Muhammad Ali Muddin actually did became the chief minister two or three times, if I'm not mistaken. And then after, so you also, apart from the parties itself, you also have the ethnicities of the ministers you should see. So there were some Hindus that became the chief minister, and then some tribal leaders, and so वो भी उसमें भी there was a lot of back and forth going on. I think after 1990, when Manipur People's Party sort of makes a comeback, and then here is where it gets very interesting. Then Manipur People's Party goes away, and then another party called the Manipur State Congress Party starts, and then
Hmm.
ultimately it gets dissolved and merges with the Congress Party. Heck, even Samta Party had a chief minister in Manipur once. And people might forget who Samta Party is. That was a party started by George Fernandez and Nitish Kumar, which is now merged into JDU. and
जया जेटली जी उसमें थी ना.
हाँ, जया जेटली उसमें थी, yes, exactly. And I think even NCP used to win a few seats in Manipur, but I honestly think that was probably because of Purna Sangma, because Purna Sangma was in the neighboring state and he was a member of the NCP. So you would probably have a lot of folks who know Mr. P. A. Sangma, and now of course he formed the Nagaland People's I'm sorry, which I forget his. I don't know why I said Nagaland People Party, but P. A. Sangma's party. I'll just look it up and tell you. He formed a new party in the National People's Party. Sorry, NPP. So I did get the sort of the short form right. But my point is that you have a lot of these senior leaders who are with the Congress, with the BJP, with NCP, have the two or three people that they're close to fighting under that party symbol, and that is why there was no national party sort of being there. बीजेपी को पहले 4 5 सीट 6 सीट उतना मिलता था, but then it had sort of disappeared completely from that before making a huge comeback in 2017. और जो दूसरा प्रॉब्लम है, another huge problem in northeast is that you have like parties going left, right and center to one formation. So you will have like 15 MLAs just resign and switch to another party, or 15 MLAs go from one to the other. So वो भी हुआ है. But now I think under Biren Singh there has been sort of a stability in terms of
No, but
Manipur.
before we get to BJP dominating from 2017 onwards, we have to inform that it was Yumkha Merabot, senior most Congress legislator and arch nemesis of Ibobi Singh ji, that
Hmm.
basically led this whole thing, right? Because people may not
Absolutely.
know that. And it is after he left that, Biren Singh ji, the
Yeah,
current
yeah, yeah.
CM, they
All of
all
them
went
came.
to the NPP, and then basically उसके बाद बीजेपी में सारे
Yeah.
आना शुरू हुए.
So NPP still has, I think, 4 seats, and I think NPF Naga People's Front also sort of won 4 seats there, which is also an NDA. Very interestingly, a lot of people may or may not remember this. Uh, in 2012, the second largest party or the chief opposition party was not the BJP in 2012, was not the MSCP. It was a party called the Trinamool Congress. So All
Yeah.
India Trinamool Congress won 7 seats, and I think this time Sushmita Dev has been sort of given a chance to, I mean, she's not leading the campaign, but she's at least, there. So I don't know if they are even fighting seats right now or something. But Sushmita Dev was at least talking about, Manipur, ki kya ho raha hai stuff. There is one, or well, when I say fighting seats, I don't know how many seats they are fighting, but there is apparently JDU who is fighting on 36 seats. I have no idea why JD, but maybe remnants of the old Samta party are still fighting on that. And again, Manipur is a very, very, very small sort of victory margins. I mean, the total population of Manipur is close to 2.9 million or 29 lakhs. So that is you, and if you divide that over the number of constituencies that they have, which is about, I think, what, 60, if I'm not mistaken. So that's very, very, very small margins. So you will have people winning by 1,000, 2,000, 300, 200 votes. So again, very difficult to predict कि क्या होगा. But right now, if I were to just put my analyst hat and just make a quick prediction, BJP is in the front, probably projected to get about 30, 32 seats. But anything could happen still.
So let me read some bits of this guy. He's a PhD candidate in JNU in Delhi. I'm going to share this article. While I was researching, I found this article to be very interesting. मतलब
Hmm.
एंडिंग तो ऐसा ऐसा लग रहा है कि भाई तू सेलिब्रेट कर रहा है कि मातम मना रहा है, मेरे को समझ में नहीं आ रहा था. So that opinion piece is called Rise of BJP in Manipur, Understanding the Changing Political Dynamics, right?
Yeah.
So here's Philip Sharma,
Hmm.
Takhil Changwam says Philip Sharma. This was written in 30th January 2022. So it's not like ये
Hmm.
बहुत पुराना है. ठीक है,
Hmm.
ये बहुत नया article है. But
Hmm.
I want to read this bit, Adit, because I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
our listeners and our viewers will benefit from this.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
interesting. Policy changes like go to village and go to hills add more rigor in rebuilding the trust
Hmm.
between the hill and valley.
Hmm.
Earlier, the hill based groups and civil society organizations blamed preceding governments for exercising partiality in governance.
Hmm. Hmm.
Development activities were mostly prioritized in the valley, where the Meitei population is uh, dominant. On the
Hmm.
contrary, the linkages that the Biren Singh government made with the civil societies and ethnic organizations had
Hmm.
greatly helped in building a good relationship between people and state. As
Hmm.
evident from the significant reduction in the number of bandh, blockades, and general strikes and encounters during the BJP government since 2017, undoubtedly, we can infer that the improved law and order situation of Manipur. According to the Union Home Ministry, data insurgency related activities in Northeast India in 2021 has reduced 80% compared to 2014.
Hmm.
Manipur has witnessed a constant declining record of insurgency related cases from 233 in 2016 to
Hmm.
167 in 2017 and 127 in 2018, according to the MHA Security Situation Report. From lowering the insurgency related incidents to bringing developments, the present BJP government has surpassed the performance of any government before. So, just like I did my job, and when we were talking about the increase of violence on Dalits in Uttarakhand, as per
Hmm.
government records, these are also government records that we are sharing. So let me read a little bit. So
Hmm.
what is interesting is also this whole idea about the beef thing. So BJP, you know, the BJP practices a different method of strategy in Northeast India to blend with the Northeast tradition. The
Hmm.
BJP presents the most flexible form of outlook in the political theater of the Northeast.
Hmm.
BJP's apparent consideration of the diversity and the unique history and culture of Manipur resulted in giving special treatment in its policy practices. In the mainstream, BJP's popular slogan includes Bharat Mata ki Jai, but in Manipur, BJP prefers using BJP na yai fare, which means victory to BJP, or BJP is great, or PM Modi jina yai fare, which translate to Prime Minister Modi is great, to capture the interests of locals. These slogans perhaps sideline the idea of BJP's Bharat, while it rather attempts to emphasize local narratives.
Hmm.
So another bit I want to talk about is the whole thing about the beef angle. The BJP does not talk about beef in
Hmm.
Northeast at all. They are
Hmm.
okay with it. So look
Hmm.
at this. From NRC in Assam to the extension of inland line permit system in Manipur, BJP showcased its apparent concern for counterculture and ethnicity. For Manipur, the demand for ILP has been a long struggle of people. Success in bringing ILP Act 2019 in Manipur is a major bargaining power for BJP in the forthcoming assembly election.
Hmm. Hmm.
So very interesting piece, but look at this end. The end also. BJP is playing sit and wait game, waiting for an appropriate time to launch its projects by gradually changing the texture of Manipur society. मतलब क्या बीजेपी ड्रामा कर रही है?
Hmm. नहीं, वो
मतलब
ये
लास्ट
क्वेश्चन,
में देखना जरूरी था.
ये क्वेश्चन मार्क वाला है ना, नहीं उसको उसको जॉब भी चाहिए ना, उसको उसको अपना जेएनयू का थीसिस भी तो पास करवाना है प्रोफेसर से,
नहीं नहीं,
सो
point is this is very interesting. The whole article
या
was finding it very hard to blame the BJP on anything. It's a
सो
very good
देयर
article. I checked the sources, I
इट
checked
इज
the data, I checked everything. It was a beautifully written piece.
सो देयर आर थ्री थिंग्स राइट दैट बीजेपी के लिए लोग जो बोलते हैं, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल यू नो फॉर दिस मिथ दैट भारत माता की जय समहाउ बीजेपी स्लोगन, राइट, इसीलिए कांग्रेस को चांटे पड़ते हैं, राइट. नो इंडियन, इफ यू गो आउट ऑन द स्ट्रीट एंड से भारत माता की जय, इज इट अ बीजेपी, आई मीन दैट्स समथिंग दैट इज अ सेंटिमेंट, देयर ओन सेंटिमेंट, एंड दे वुड एक्सपेक्ट एज बीजेपी सेज इट, कांग्रेस आल्सो टू से इट. But the fact that some folks on the far left start saying, "Oh, Bharat Mata ki Jai" is this BJP slogan, that actually results in Congress getting the absolute slapping it gets in urban seats, right? But there are three major things that I found from the article which are very fascinating. Because बीजेपी के क्या criticisms पहले होते थे कि this is a primarily upper caste party, कि it will only reward, not in Manipur, I'm talking about in the heartland states, कि you know the term that was used, and I'm quoting people, कि it was party of the Brahmins and the Baniyas, right? That's what the term it was used and stuff. They will try and do this pan national sort of thing and not do state local level leadership. And third, the tribes are very sort of skeptical कि tribal values का क्या होगा. तीनों पे I think BJP has actually gone the other way, and it always was the other way, right? In fact, see, the right now the base of the BJP actually is part of the OBC votes, right? You have a lot of OBC leaders coming as sort of chief minister and things like that. And this is not just, I think, many analysts, Yashwant Deshmukh and many of them have seen that if you look at the percentage of BJP leaders becoming ministers, right, you find that it is actually equal representation. It is not sort of gone towards one caste or the other caste and so forth. So they have understood that in states like Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, many other states, even Gujarat, they have cracked that. So firstly, that's second is the tribal angle that you said, respecting the local sentiments of what the local Manipuri population want, or what the local Ahom population wants in Assam, and so forth. That is why they have been able to do Northeast. And third most important thing, they have did what they did in the Northeast with the help of local Northeast leaders, right? Like Mr. Modi still remains the face who comes to campaign, but the strategy is decided by the Northeast leaders, by leaders in Manipur. It's not that a Gandhi family in Congress, that Rahul Gandhi will decide कि इसको टिकट मिलेगी, इसको टिकट मिलेगी, based on what discussions they do in Delhi. अच्छा, I'll ask our listeners, and I'll ask you this question also. Before 2014 or something, what discussions did we have about the Northeast in Delhi media, and in very, I mean, very very primitive discussions, right? The only leaders that were talked about that much in Delhi media were some Lok Sabha MPs for Assam, maybe in from Manipur and others. Like you had, I think, Agatha Sangma, PA Sangma's daughter, who was a member of parliament from Turo. She was the only one that were talking about. मुझे तो याद भी नहीं है that we talked about Manipur elections or leaders from Manipur in Delhi media. So that has changed, and people do see that now it's in conversations and things. So that is why the BJP is able to hold on to the power. And Agatha Sangma only because she was a member of the NCP, in Meghalaya, so that, and a minister. So that's why it was talked about more.
Okay, now I'm going to share excerpts from Nalin Mehta's book. Okay, so this is the BJP's 5 strategies within the Northeast.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read the whole thing. Strategy one, mergers and acquisition. At least 50% of all BJP ministers in 5 northeastern states defected from other parties. Let's be
Hmm.
very open.
Hmm.
Now we get into, this is the defectors of parties का chart. Unfortunately, I cannot enlarge this. ये Kindle पे इससे ज़्यादा होता नहीं है. देख,
Hmm.
असम में परसेंटेज 50% है, त्रिपुरा में 50% है, नागालैंड में 50% है, मणिपुर में 80%,
Wow.
मेघालय में 100%, अरुणाचल में 100%. ठीक है, अभी आगे जाते हैं. अभी थोड़ा मैं आगे जाते हैं. Very interesting book, by the way. Strategy
Oh,
2, strategic alliances, co-option and partnerships. NEDA as an anti-Congress alliance umbrella. Basically, ये NEDA, the first step towards this was a formation of NEDA coalition. Basically, ये हेमंत बिस्वा शर्मा का coalition था, कांग्रेस मुक्त नॉर्थ ईस्ट का पार्ट था ये.
absolutely.
ठीक है. So the role of NEDA in expanding the BJP's footprint in Northeast 2019 general election results. भाई,
Hmm.
मतलब, phew, just unbelievable. Just look at the results.
It's
I mean,
insane.
it's insane. That's why I have to do nothing. I just have to freaking share this book. It
Yeah.
is insane. The data is insane. See, local alliances, strategic flexibility, and co-opting key groups. That is another thing that BJP did. Right?
Hmm.
I mean, I don't have to do anything. Like, see, here he has given all the parties and all, but I want to share this data with everyone. So BJP's coalitions in northeastern states from 2016 to 2021, right?
Hmm.
Assam में कौन सी है, अरुणाचल में कौन सी है, मणिपुर में 15 मार्च से बीरेन सिंह, बीजेपी, एनपीपी, नागालैंड में कौन सी है, मेघालय में कौन सी है, त्रिपुरा में कौन सी है. I'm just leaving it all out there. Please buy this freaking book. This book will explain to you what the hell BJP is up to.
So
BJP's rise in Tripura. Just look at it, man. It's insane.
yeah, and I've actually I'm reading this book right now. I think it's one of the best written books I've read in a long time about the BJP
Yes.
because it and for and hopefully I'm hoping to talk to Nalin very soon too on this. So stay tuned for that, guys. But one thing about this book is it starts with the rise of the Pakistani Hindu refugees that come to Delhi, which formed the Jansang's base. Right, Delhi voted for BJP in the 60s when no one in India was voting for the Jansang in the same amount. That's Delhi. Delhi was the first base for the Bharatiya Jansang, which transformed into Janata Party and BJP. And it's very important that you start from there. Most analysis on modern day BJP starts with the Ram Mandir movement or things like that, or the 80s or Vajpayee forming the emergency and things like that. The reason why it's important to start with Delhi is because Nalin starts with the thinking why that generation that came was passionate about the Ram Mandir movement because they viewed it very differently from what the Nehruvian generation in India viewed the Ram Mandir movement. And that senior generation is what catapulted the Ram Mandir movement, and then the young people took over, and so forth. But to understand BJP, it's very important to approach the right way. Similarly, for these elections, Tripura was a left bastion. Manik
Yeah.
Sarkar famously donated all his money to his party and stayed on the allowance that CPIM used to give him, right? And Manik Sarkar
Yes.
was not known as a corrupt leader and stuff, but the
वो
leftists did
साइकिल में
have
जाते थे and all that होता था ना उनका.
mm, वो टिपिकल लेफ्टिस्ट
Communist.
हर कोई ज्योति बासु की तरह तबीयत से फेंकता नहीं है विद इन द CPIM. But anyways, he lost, and now the BJP is almost indefeatable in Tripura because not only are they doing good work, and after the initial things of Biplab, they tried to create this big controversy and things like that. Now suddenly all the discussions have stopped because Tripura, I think, was a state where AFSPA was repealed, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm. I think it was
So
Tripura.
yeah, so not only is this happening, not only are they completely gaining sort of foothold in local tribal areas with local leaders and forming a second generation of leadership. I think ultimately the BJP is expanding itself into the northeast. The problem, of course, that is that because of the population and things like that, you have a very limited sort of Lok Sabha dominance. So the BJP is, I think, at a point where it cannot expand any further. So the most it can do is maintain what it has, right? It's going to be impossible for them to do further. That is what the other parties are taking heart in. Unfortunately, what that has resulted in their narrow attitude is it's resulted into a Northeast not becoming a tourist hub like it should have. I mean, it has some of the most stunning, beautiful places in India, but it's been so
Agreed.
neglected and so been out of sight, out of mind. And some of the grouses that the people have are very legitimate.
Yeah.
And that was a result where the whole missionary situation also happened in the 1940s and so forth. Why they were because we, I mean, as I hate to use the word mainland India or something, but the rest of India sort of ignored parts of the Northeast, and we were very unfair, to them. And then the insurgencies post 70s did not help. Second, they have a lot of issues with the language and stuff because they have their own language, their own practices, their own religious practices, and things like that. So it required some patience. It required a lot of understanding, and I think finally we are there. Ki even someone who is completely and bitterly opposed to the BJP writes that piece saying, you know what, actually BJP understands what Manipur is facing, but since I am not a fan of BJP, I will not give them a complete clean sheet. But so far they've done anything wrong.
Look, my understanding of what BJP has done as far as their work in Northeast is just fantastic. And like I said, Nalin Mehta's book shows the kind of BJP that has transformed into Modi and Shah. It has become into a micro management firm that does micromanagement at the level of the booth. And it's the Zilla head, the Mandal head, the ward head.
Yeah.
um, you know who's going to be there, what is the caste breakdown in that area, which caste matters the most. They have understood India like nobody's business.
No.
And the way they have taken this juggernaut forward, it's just it is something to be watched, looked at, and done. Now, what does the future hold for the BJP? Nobody knows, yeah, because you can never say which leader is going to. Right now people are saying Amit Shah ji honge, या योगी आदित्यनाथ होंगे. We never know what 20 years down the line or 30 years down the line which leader is going to come out of the ranks. Till now the BJP has pretty much been dominated by RSS people as far as going to the top is concerned. Yogi Adityanath, most people don't realize, is not a RSS person. People don't realize that fact, that Yogi Adityanath might be the first one who might break that trend, right? When he as they say, he's going to go eventually, his ascendancy to the top is going to be happening. But it's a very, 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 very interesting time in Indian politics. And these small states, and how BJP controls small states, that is something that I have always paid attention to, and I have tried to understand BJP is working through the small states. Look,
Hmm.
UP mein to BJP does do what it does, right? It tries to manage whatever it's trying to manage when it comes to the state of UP, and we're going to be focusing on UP obviously next week whenever we fix the time and day.
अच्छा, ये
But the
मुझे ये
point is,
शगुफा, एक सेकंड कुशल, ये शगुफा डालने दो. यूपी इलेक्शन इज अ लॉट क्लोजर देन व्हाट पीपल थिंक इट इज. I
yeah,
I
very
I
good.
just said it. Next week आ जाना.
Yeah.
Why?
सो बट ठीक है. सो लास्ट लास्ट क्लोजिंग कमेंट्स, बिकॉज पता नहीं आज क्वेश्चंस जो हैं, मतलब ऑल द क्वेश्चंस आर अबाउट एवरीथिंग अदर देन द टॉपिक ऑफ द डे, सो आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू आस्क देम. सो बेसिकली सी दिस शोज पीपल्स इंटरेस्ट इन उत्तराखंड एंड मणिपुर. तो वो लोग सही ही हैं, लोगों को वो स्टेट्स को जानना नहीं है, दैट इज जस्ट द रियलिटी. मगर हमने हमारा काम किया. बट सो बिफोर वी रैप, सो तुझे क्या लगता है, कौन जीतेगा उत्तराखंड, कौन जीतेगा मणिपुर?
Okay, so I'll start with Manipur first, and then we'll go swing back to Uttarakhand. Manipur, I think, is going to be, both are going to be very close elections. I think Manipur mein BJP is slightly ahead. I would say Manipur mein BJP is a little more ahead than it is in Uttarakhand because it has different issues, right? And generally, I think they do try to people in states with some insurgency issues and stuff do sometimes try to vote for the same party that's in power in the national in the center because it sort of helps. एंड मणिपुर में इतना sort of revolving door नहीं हुआ. दूसरा, मणिपुर is another fascinating thing also because it even though it's a small state, it votes in two phases because of the insurgency issues and so forth. So मुझे लगता है कि बीजेपी will sort of have the last time I think the difference between the BJP was about close to 1.2%, but BJP of course was in alliance with a lot of parties, so it was more if you add the alliance. So I think BJP and alliance partners should be able to cross the 30 sort of threshold pretty easily, 35 threshold pretty easily. Sorry, no, 30 threshold pretty easily. Uttarakhand is 35. So coming to Uttarakhand mein, I think the Congress and BJP are neck and neck. There are about 10 to 12 seats. So I can guarantee you both will win close to at least 15 to 20 seats each. Now, the rest, which are the other 30 seats, right? उसमें से कुछ सीट्स ऐसे होंगी जहां कांग्रेस और बीजेपी की लड़ाई इज गोइंग टू बी विद इन 2 or 3% margin, and the 10-15 seats, other seats are going to be a four-corner contest where BSP, Uttarakhand Kranti Dal, BJP, and Congress are all going to be fighting together. Those 40 seats will decide the election. Right now, I personally think Congress is marginally, very marginally ahead. But that is like I'm talking about 0.2, 0.3% is what I've heard from a lot of my friends. On the ground. BJP actually could have settled for a huge loss in Uttarakhand because of the whole chief minister thing fiasco that was happening, where they left, switch between three chief ministers and stuff. But now I think the Pushkar Singh Dhami has gotten a lot of it under control. But I don't see them repeating the 57 seats margin. No way. वो शायद बीजेपी may have good seats because BJP's vote share is not as concentrated. BJP's vote share actually helps in getting more bang for its buck than the Congress's does. So even though they are sort of close by, BJP might end up getting a little more seats than the Congress. But I have a feeling that they are going to need some independents or some Uttarakhand Kranti Dal MLAs to form the government in the end.
Yeah, I think Manipur is going to be BJP victory, in my opinion, and Uttarakhand. Before the seat distribution, I would have said close contest. You don't know who wins, but I think BJP after the seat distribution, I think BJP just slightly हल्का सा favorite है. जैसे वो बोलते हैं ना कि some of those boxing bouts where you really can't predict who won, but then no matter who wins in the end, it's not a robbery, that kind of a thing. So it could be. Let's see what happens. So we'll wrap today's discussion up on that note. Adit, as always, thanks a lot for coming. We'll figure out when we are doing Uttar Pradesh. March 10th के पहले कर देंगे, वो पक्की बात है.
मार्च 7th के पहले फिर से एग्जिट पोल्स आएंगे ना,
उसके पहले कर देंगे ताकि अपनी थोड़ी लाल कर सके.
नहीं, पर नेक्स्ट वीक या उसके बाद, I mean within the next 10 days let's plan on doing it, because I'm seeing some fascinating things in Uttar Pradesh, और वो तो आराम से ही करना पड़ेगा because UP itself is completely complicated.
घंटा लगेगा. उसको तो ज्यादा टाइम लगेगा क्योंकि वो स्टेट भी बड़ी है. इसके लिए हमने ये 2 स्टेट साथ में कर दी, उसको 1.5 घंटा कर लेंगे. तो चलो, we'll wrap today's podcast up. Adit, as always, thanks a lot for coming.
Absolutely, pleasure is mine.
All right, guys, so we'll wrap today's discussion up. Please subscribe to the Cārvāka podcast YouTube channel. Also, go on Spotify, leave a rating, go on iTunes, do the thing. Audio platform पे भी जाओ और उधर भी अपने reviews रखो और rating डालो. Please support the Cārvāka podcast. You can become a member on YouTube, or you can go on Patreon and support the podcast. You can also send your donations through UPI and buy the Cārvāka podcast merch. Remember, this Sunday, the Patreon discussions and the Valmiki Ramayana discussions are not going to be happening. I'm visiting Delhi, so they will happen next week. I will see you guys next time. Until then, namaste. Take care. Bye-bye.